A sudden, life-changing inheritance seemed like a dream come true, until I overheard my husband planning to steal it all. What he didn't know was that the inheritance was actually my trap. The steering wheel felt like a lottery ticket in my hands, a tangible piece of a future I'd only ever dreamed of. The sun was streaming through the windshield, making the dust motes dance in the air, and for the first time in years, I didn't just see dust, I saw glitter. I had a stupidly wide grin plastered on my face, the kind that makes your cheeks ache, and I was singing along to some cheesy pop song on the radio at the top of my lungs. I probably looked like a lunatic to the other drivers, this 30-something woman in a 10-year-old sedan, beaming like she'd just won an Oscar. In a way, I had. Just an hour ago, I was sitting in a stuffy law office that smelled of old books and lemon polish. I was perched on the edge of a stiff leather chair, nervously fiddling with the strap of my purse, while a man named Mr. Abernathy, who looked exactly as you'd picture a family lawyer to look, adjusted his spectacles. He was telling me about my great-aunt Mildred, a woman I'd met maybe twice in my entire life, at family funerals where she'd patted my head and smelled faintly of lavender and mothballs. I barely remembered her, but apparently she had remembered me. Mr. Abernathy slid a thick folder across the mahogany desk. "She left you everything, my dear," he'd said, his voice a gentle rumble. "The house in Willow Creek, the portfolio of investments, everything." I'd stared at him blankly. "Everything?" I squeaked, my voice barely a whisper. He gave me a kind, paternal smile. "The estate is valued after all taxes and fees at a figure well into the 7 figures. 7 figures. The words didn't compute at first. They floated in the air between us, nonsensical. My husband Mark and I were experts in 4-figure problems. The $500 car repair that throws the whole month into chaos. The $2,000 root canal that has to go on a credit card, the constant grinding anxiety of being one broken appliance away from financial ruin. We were house poor, drowning in a mortgage for a starter home we'd bought at the peak of the market, a home that now had a leaky roof and window frames that were starting to rot. We talked about having kids one day when we were more stable. We dreamed of traveling one day when we could afford it. One day had become a sad punchline in our lives, the mythical time when all our worries would magically disappear. And now, with a few words from a man I'd never met before, one day was today. My mind was racing as I drove, painting a vibrant mural of our new life over the gray canvas of our old one. I saw Mark's face, the way his eyes would widen, the way the deep worry lines on his forehead would finally smooth out. He worked so hard taking on extra shifts at the warehouse, his body aching when he came home at night, all to chip away at our mountain of debt. I could finally tell him to quit. I could finally give him the rest he so desperately deserved. We could fix the roof. We could go to Italy, a trip he'd been talking about since we first met. We could finally start our family without the suffocating fear of how we'd afford diapers, let alone college. The joy was a physical thing, a bubbling wellspring in my chest that threatened to overflow. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles white, just to ground myself. This was real. This was happening. I pulled into our driveway, the familiar crunch of gravel under the tires a comforting sound. The house looked the same, a little tired, the paint peeling slightly on the porch. But I saw it through new eyes. It wasn't a burden anymore. It was our home, and soon it would be perfect. I killed the engine, my heart thumping a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I couldn't wait to see his face. I grabbed my purse and the thick folder from the passenger seat, practically skipping to the front door as I fumbled for my keys. "Mark!" I called out as I stepped inside, dropping my purse on the little entryway table. "Honey, you are not going to believe the day I've had." The house was quiet. That wasn't unusual. He sometimes wore headphones while working in his small home office. I smiled to myself, planning the reveal. Maybe I'd sit him down, pour us a glass of wine, and then slide the folder across the table just like Mr. Abernathy had. I walked down the hall toward his office, my footsteps muffled by the worn runner. I could hear a low murmur now. So he was on the phone. I didn't want to interrupt a work call. I slowed down, pausing by the door, which was slightly ajar. I figured I'd wait until he was finished, but then I heard a few of his words, his voice low and conspiratorial, a tone I'd never heard him use before. "It's done," he said, his voice hushed but clear. "She just left the lawyer's office. She signed everything." A small, confused frown creased my brow. What was he talking about? Signed what? There was a pause, and I could hear the faint, tinny sound of someone talking on the other end of the line. Then Mark spoke again, and the next words he said made the folder slip from my numb fingers, scattering papers all over the hallway floor. "I know, I can't believe it either," he said, and I heard a dry, humorless chuckle. "She fell for it completely. The entire inheritance. It's ours." The sound of the papers hitting the floor seemed to echo in the sudden, vast silence of my world. My breath caught in my throat, a painful, sharp little hitch. The joy that had been fizzing inside me just moments before didn't just disappear. It curdled, turning into something cold and heavy that sank straight to the pit of my stomach. Ours. He'd said ours. But the way he said it wasn't the hours of a partnership. It was the hours of predators sharing a kill. My body moved before my brain could catch up. On autopilot, fueled by a primal instinct to hide, I backed away from the doorway, my socked feet silent on the hardwood. My hand fumbled behind me, searching for a doorknob, any doorknob. My fingers brushed against the cool brass handle of the linen closet. I slipped inside, pulling the door until it was just a hair's breadth from clicking shut. My body pressed back against stacks of clean-smelling towels. The narrow slit of light from the hallway illuminated the dust motes dancing in the dark, a cruel parody of the glitter I'd imagined in the car. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to make sense of it. A scam? Was Great Aunt Mildred's inheritance a scam? No, that didn't make sense. Mr. Abernathy was from a reputable firm. The documents looked real, felt real. The only part that was fake, it seemed, was my husband. I held my breath, straining to hear more. Mark's voice came again, lower this time, but the thin closet door did little to muffle the words that would incinerate my life. "Yeah, Jessica. We pulled it off," he murmured. Jessica, my best friend, my maid of honor, the godmother I'd always planned for our non-existent children. A wave of nausea so profound washed over me that I had to brace myself against the shelves to keep from falling. "Just a little longer now," he continued, his voice dripping with a false sincerity I now recognized as his default setting. "I have to play the loving, supportive husband for a bit. She's going to come in any second, all excited. Yeah, I'll handle her. We just need her signature on the joint account forms, and then we're free." There was another pause, and then the final brutal blow. "Gotta go. I think I hear her. Love you." The click of his phone ending the call was like a gunshot in the quiet house. I heard the scrape of his office chair, his footsteps approaching. He was coming out. He was going to find the papers scattered in the hall. He was going to find me. Panic gave way to a chilling, diamond-hard clarity. I couldn't fall apart. Not now. I had to play the part he'd just assigned me, the happy, oblivious wife. I pushed the closet door open, blinking in the hallway light like I was just emerging. My eyes fell to the mess of papers on the floor, and I had my excuse. "Oh my gosh, I'm so clumsy," I said, my voice sounding strangely high-pitched and foreign to my own ears. I knelt down, my hands trembling as I began to gather the sheets. "Honey? What's wrong?" Mark's voice was a study in feigned concern. He was standing at the end of the hall, his face a perfect mask of loving worry. The man I had promised to love in sickness and in health was a complete stranger, a monster wearing my husband's skin. "Nothing's wrong," I forced a laugh, a brittle, unconvincing sound. "Everything is amazing." I stood up, clutching the folder to my chest like a shield. I walked towards him, my legs feeling like they were made of lead, and I forced myself to meet his gaze. I pasted on the wide, joyful smile I'd been wearing in the car. "Mark, you need to sit down," I said, my voice shaking with expertly faked excitement. "My great-aunt Mildred, she passed away, and she left everything to me, to us." I watched him perform. His eyes widened, his jaw dropped. He ran a hand through his hair in perfect disbelief. It was a flawless imitation of a man whose life had just been changed for the better. He was a phenomenal actor. I'd been his captive audience for 8 years. "Are you serious?" he breathed, stepping forward and taking the folder from my hands. He pulled me into a hug, burying his face in my hair, his arms wrapped around me, the familiar comfort of his embrace now feeling like the coils of a snake. I went rigid, every muscle in my body screaming to push him away, to run. "This is it, babe," he whispered against my temple, his voice thick with fake emotion. "This is everything we've been working for. We're free." He used the same word, free, the word he'd used with Jessica. He pulled back, his eyes shining with unshed crocodile tears. He looked down at the top document in the folder, his finger tracing the letterhead of the law firm. Then he looked at me, his expression turning serious, businesslike. "This is incredible," he said, his voice now a low, urgent thrum. "We need to be smart about this. The first step is to secure it." He flipped through a few pages, his eyes scanning them with a predatory focus. He stopped, pulling one sheet out from the rest. He held it up for me to see. It was a bank form, pre-filled with the estate account number. "Look," he said, pointing to a line at the bottom. "Mr. Abernathy even included the transfer on death and joint signatory forms, to make things simple. We should fill this out right now so I can protect you. And the money." He smiled, a warm, reassuring smile that didn't reach his cold eyes. "Just a quick signature right here, and everything will officially be ours." My hand hovered over the paper, the cheap ballpoint pen feeling impossibly heavy. I could feel his eyes on me, boring into me with an intensity that was pure greed disguised as love. He was so close. He could taste the money. I let out a shaky, breathy laugh, playing the part of an overwhelmed wife to perfection. "Ours," I repeated, looking up at him through my lashes, letting my eyes fill with manufactured tears of joy. I can't believe it. After all this time, all the worrying. I pressed a hand to my chest dramatically. "We should celebrate. We should call Jessica. Oh my God, she is going to lose her mind when we tell her." I watched his face carefully. For a fraction of a second, a flicker of pure panic crossed his features before he expertly smoothed it over with a broad smile. "Yeah, honey, of course. But let's get this sorted first. Just a quick signature, then we can call the whole world if you want." You're right. Always so practical," I cooed. I leaned over the kitchen counter, my hair falling forward to hide my face. I needed that moment to compose myself, to steel my spine. I took a deep breath that smelled of lemon cleaner and betrayal, and then I signed my name with a flourish on the line he'd pointed to. I signed the name he had tried to steal. He snatched the paper up almost before the ink was dry, his eyes scanning my signature like a starving man looking at a loaf of bread. A grin of pure, triumphant avarice spread across his face. He thought he'd won. He folded the paper carefully and tucked it into his shirt pocket, patting it like a long-lost friend. "There," he said, his voice husky with relief. "All safe. Now, about that celebration." "Absolutely," I said, my voice suddenly clear and steady. The act was over. I straightened up, pushing my hair back from my face and meeting his gaze directly. The shift in my demeanor was so abrupt it made him pause, his triumphant smile faltering. "There's just one more thing," I said, reaching into my purse that I'd left on the counter. He frowned, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. I pulled out my phone. "I feel like we're missing someone. It's not a real party without all the key players, right?" I tapped the screen, and his own voice filled the silent kitchen, low, conspiratorial, and utterly damning. "It's done. She just left the lawyer's office. She signed everything." Mark froze, the color draining from his face. His eyes darted from my phone to my face, his mouth opening and closing silently like a fish. "I know. I can't believe it either. She fell for it completely. The entire inheritance. It's ours." I let the recording play, every word a hammer blow against the life we'd built. I watched understanding dawn, followed by sheer cornered animal terror. "Yeah, Jessica, we pulled it off. I'll handle her. Love you." I hit stop. The silence that followed was deafening. You heard that?" he stammered, taking a half step back. "Every word," I said, my voice as cold and hard as marble. "I was in the linen closet. Dropped the papers, you see. So clumsy of me." His mind was racing, I could see it. He was looking for an angle, a lie big enough to cover this. "Baby, it's not what you think. That was a joke. A role-play thing Jessica and I were doing to surprise you." The absurdity of the lie was almost laughable. I didn't laugh. "Was it also a joke when you started an affair with my best friend 6 months after our wedding?" I asked calmly. "Or when you two systematically drained my personal savings account over the last 3 years, forging my signature on checks you thought I'd never notice? You thought I was stupid. You thought I was just a happy, oblivious little wife who managed the household budget so poorly that a few $1,000s going missing would just look like my own incompetence." His face was a mask of chalky white. He was speechless. "You see, Mark," I continued, taking a step towards him as he took one back, "when Mr. Abernathy called me about an inheritance, I didn't just think about us. I hired a private investigator. I've spent the last 2 weeks learning all about your little life, your shared apartment with Jessica, the debt you're in, your plan to get my signature and disappear." I gestured to his shirt pocket. "That form I signed? It's real. It authorizes you as a joint signatory, but it takes 24 hours to process." I held up my phone again. This recording, however, has already been processed. It was emailed to Mr. Abernathy, my new divorce lawyer and a detective at the fraud division 10 minutes ago. It was also sent to Jessica's husband. I believe he's on his way to your little love nest right now. The last bit of fight went out of him. He slumped against the counter, his whole body seeming to shrink. He had nothing left. No lies, no escape routes. "I left you everything in the house," I said, walking past him towards the front door. "The leaky roof, the rotting window frames, the mountain of debt that's in your name alone. Have fun with it." I paused at the door and looked back at the pathetic man who used to be my husband. "You wanted us to be free. Well, guess what?" I gave him a bright, genuine, and utterly merciless smile. "I am." I walked out the door and didn't look back. I got into my 10-year-old sedan, the car that had felt like a lottery ticket just an hour before. It wasn't a lottery ticket, it was an escape pod. And as I drove away from the wreckage of my old life under the same bright sun, I wasn't grinning like a lunatic anymore. I was calm. I was in control. And for the first time in a very long time, I was truly, completely, and gloriously on my own.